What's up everyone? So I've already reviewed the new Candyman film, which you can go watch on my channel right now. But I did want to touch on one particular scene of the movie that I didn't include in my discussion, the art gallery murder scene. What interested me about this scene was mainly due to one particular character that was introduced, a very minor character, but it seemed to me like the film, through this character, was trying to make some kind of stereotyped representation or commentary perhaps on goth or goth subculture, which I found interesting also for the fact that the film has a very art house stylization to it, a kind of style and aesthetic that I found also very goth or gothic. So I wanted to tease out in this video exactly what the film was trying to say, if anything, about goth. Let's dive right into it. In leading up to the scene, we find Anthony McCoy creates an exhibit called Say My Name, based on the Candyman urban legend. Say My Name may or may not be a reference to the song by Destiny's Child. However, I was interested in a different music reference in connection with the character of Jerica Cooper, played by Miriam Moss, the goth girlfriend of Clive Privler, played by Brian King, one of Brianna's pretentious art colleagues. Jerica sports a Joy Division t-shirt and references two of their songs, Atrocity Exhibition and Love Will Tear Us Apart. Both Jerica and Clive are shallow hipsters who make a show of their countercultural edginess when really they're just looking to cash in on the next hot new art trend, even if it means exploiting others, particularly their black colleagues, and appropriating their cultural experience. They are condescending towards McCoy's exhibit as well as the Candyman urban legend. So you know Candyman is coming for them. After the exhibit, they start getting kinky and say Candyman's name. Candyman appears and dispatches them in one of the most visually arresting kills of the movie, a scene whose grisliness is countered by its beauty and artistry. Ironically, their deaths launch McCoy's success and fame, making his Candyman exhibit go viral in the art world. Maybe I'm going too deep with this, but I wondered what the film has against goth girls and why it cheekily references Joy Division, not once but several times. Clive even says to Jerica, "All right, we know, you like Joy Division." For those of you who don't know, Joy Division was an English post-punk band formed in 1976. Their dark, gloomy sound, combining heavily bass-driven melodies with ambient synthwave beats, gained them wide attention. After releasing several singles and 2 albums, their career was tragically cut short when lead vocalist and lyricist Ian Curtis committed suicide on the eve of their US tour in 1980. Many have seen Curtis's death ominously foreshadowed in Joy Division's music, most overtly in the album cover of their second and final album, Closer, which featured a tomb on its cover, specifically the Oppiani family tomb in J. Noah's monumental cemetery of Stagliano. Curtis's severe epileptic seizures, which impacted his ability to perform on stage, was a significant factor in his decline. His songwriting tends to have a nihilistic bent and provides a window into his mind. He composed powerfully macabre lyrics with recurring themes of alienation, moral decay, and cultural decadence. In 1979, record producer Martin Hannett famously described Joy Division's dark, foreboding sound as gothic, a term later popularized to describe a musical style characterized by its dark, macabre themes. Gothic or goth shares a similar aesthetic to the horror genre, which makes sense given that the goth style takes inspiration from the themes and paraphernalia of horror and the supernatural, such as vampires, death, magic, and the occult. For instance, BAUHAUS, one of the first groups identified as goth, made waves through the post-punk scene of the late 70s and 80s with their popular single, Bela Lugosi's Dead. Goth fashion is often ostentatious and overwrought, marked by elaborate tattooings, piercings, and, most importantly, all black attire. There is a self-indulgent pretentiousness to the goth aesthetic. If you identify as goth, you mark yourself as an outcast at variance with the prevailing social norms. This subversiveness is often expressed by a morbid fascination with exhibitionistic self-displays of alienation, pain, and suffering. It's no surprise that goths adopt some of the traits of S&M culture, which entered the mainstream through Clive Barker's film Hellraiser. Like Pinhead, goths eroticize pain, cultivating a love of darkness, where embracing darkness, consuming decadent, horror-themed content becomes synonymous with having depth, layers, and complexity. At the same time, this cult of darkness has a certain tongue-in-cheek self-awareness. Goth is also performative, exhibiting a theatricality, a sardonic sense of its death-obsessed imagination as all for show, only skin deep, or adopted for the sake of pure fashion. Granted, this definition of goth is pretty generalized, and Joy Division doesn't fit the stereotypical goth mold entirely. In Candyman, Jerrica's character is treated as an annoying goth girl who believes she is a counter-cultural rebel just because she listens to Joy Division songs. McCoy's Say My Name installation is, of course, inspired by the Candyman legend and visualizes black trauma in all its stark, naked horror. In contrast to the very real historical trauma behind the Candyman legend, I think the film mocks goth culture through Jerrica as just a fake appropriation of trauma, which treats it as an object of consumption, a badge of countercultural coolness. However, it's worth further exploring the film's references to two of Joy Division's songs. One, Atrocity Exhibition, and two, Love Will Tear Us Apart. The Atrocity Exhibition reference is a bit on the nose in a scene involving an art exhibit of racial crimes and atrocities. Atrocity Exhibition envisions the human drama as a theater of death, where life is cheap, chaos reigns, and murder is exploited for entertainment. McCoy's Candyman installation would be a perfect visualization of Joy Division's Atrocity Exhibition. Both Ian Curtis and McCoy are tortured artists, expressing trauma in an undisguised form, even reenacting the trauma before the audience's very eyes. Grail Marcus suggested that Curtis reenacted his epileptic seizures when performing, quote, using them as a form of energy and a form of music. McCoy's paintings, like the existential horror in Joy Division's music, are subversive because they don't try to sublimate trauma or reduce its horror by making it into an object of entertainment. By reenacting the trauma on an artistic level, the horror is not alleviated cathartically, as you might expect, but is enhanced and intensified. Clive's character even comments on the raw, undiluted horror of McCoy's paintings. I see the film as undercutting the subversive implications of McCoy's art by making the death scenes entertaining instead of repulsive. The flatly drawn characters of Clive and Jerrica are your garden variety disposable horror victims, and the film wants you to enjoy their deaths. When you think about it, horror and entertainment at first seem antithetical. How can you be horrified yet entertained at the same time? Well, horror films often offset their unpleasant, macabre subject matter, which could alienate the audience, by making it enjoyable, emphasizing the pleasure factor. Horror victims, such as Jerrica and Clive, are often made unsympathetic, which makes their deaths easier to watch and maybe even desired. Catharsis is thus achieved by associating the horror with a pleasurable feeling. By the way, the reference to Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart seems like a cheeky presaging of Clive and Jerica's deaths, when Candyman literally tears them apart while the couple are about to have sex. Their deaths are also beautifully staged to feel stylish, elegant, and artistic, thus emphasizing the beauty of the sequence over the horror. Ironically, the film at times perpetuates what it mocks about goth subculture through its stylized horror and emphasis on the entertainment factor, as is the case in the gallery murder scene. This style over substance approach would be fine if the film had a sense of humor or irony about itself. However, it takes itself so seriously through elevating its campy horror elements to an art house level and tying them to strong themes of social justice, although the campiness remains through the generic characters and exploitation factor of some of the death scenes. However, the film ultimately saves itself through deeply engaging you with the horror of racial violence at the center of its story. I think the film misunderstands the goth aesthetic, particularly since this new Candyman could even be described as gothic in some of its artistic pretensions and stylization. When comparing McCoy and Joy Division, I remarked on how the significance of the Atrocity exhibition, both the song itself and its thematic connection to the film, lies in its depicting of horror in a stark, naked form. This kind of art isn't intended to heal, but leaves you in a state of existential horror, which is an element of the Gothic aesthetic as well. I wanted to show how goth is not just about style and theatrics, although that's a big part of it, but is also a mood, an atmosphere, a state of mind. This video was a thought experiment intended to tease out why the film makes Jerica into a kind of goth Karen. The script could have easily written her as an entitled white hipster without making her goth. It not only made her goth, or a stereotyped version of goth, but also implicated her goth identity as a sign of her privilege and naivety in regard to real trauma, or the racial horror of McCoy's exhibit, as opposed to the performed artificial trauma of her Joy Division obsession. Maybe the film did intend to thematically connect McCoy's Candyman-themed exhibit to Joy Division's Atrocity exhibition, which would then give more substance to the goth references in the film. In the end, I think the film is somewhat internally conflicted regarding its own gothic roots and stylization. I do question how it reduces goth subculture to a generic type, making goth into an annoying character quirk for a disposable character. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.